witches, welcome to the Witch With Me Academy. This course is Beginning a Witch's Apothecary, and I'm your instructor for that course, Josie Hellebore. I am a blogger, I'm an author, I'm currently writing a book on garden witchcraft, and it was an honor to be asked by Witch With Me to instruct this course. As far as I can remember, and I've been practicing for over 20 years, plants and herbs have been a huge part of my craft. I know that not all witches use green witchcraft or working with plants, and that's okay. We all have our things, right? But I want to be able to share with you, if you don't know about working with plants, or you're new to witchcraft, or maybe you just want to sharpen up some of the things that you already learned and learn some new techniques. I want to be able to help and guide you in that process. We're going to cover a lot of ground in this course. We are going to cover making oils, herb blends, teas, decoctions, salves, tinctures, poultices, and herbal baths, just to name a few. There will be instructional how-to videos included on many of the exercises we will be doing. There's also going to be an herbal correspondences list that should be able to help you, if you're new especially, to learn about basic herbs and their magical and medicinal purposes. Now, one thing I do want to say that's very important, when you're working with plants and herbs, especially if you have any intentions of applying them topically or ingesting them, it's very important that you research to find out if that plant is in fact edible, ingestible, if it's toxic, if it can cause adverse reactions when consumed by people. And one other thing you really want to consider is if you are pregnant, trying to get pregnant, or nursing, there are a lot of herbs that are not safe to handle, much less consume. And if you're providing kind of natural remedies for your home or family or loved ones, it's important to consider if they're in that state as well. So I implore you to, although in my herbal correspondences sheet, I did include, oftentimes herbs that do have those adverse effects to people or if that are not safe, but I want to implore that you always do your own research. Don't ever take just one person's word for it. And I can say that without a shadow of doubt of anything about the craft. Always do your own research, always double check, but especially in regards to ingesting or applying any kind of plant materials. It's also important that if you're going to forage, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, that you make sure that the plants that you're foraging haven't been sprayed with pesticides or herbicides or other kind of poisons that could be toxic to you or your family or even your pets. Just some things to consider. Whether you are a seasoned witch or new to the craft, this online course will help you learn how to create and utilize a witch's apothecary. I'm excited to present this to you. I've worked really hard on creating this curriculum, and I'm excited to share everything with you that I've learned in over 20 years of practice. One thing I do want to make sure that I tell you from the jump is that this course will require that you have some supplies and some ingredients. Now, I certainly don't want anyone to, break the bank or feel like they're obligated to spend above their means. But I will tell you that we're going to be using a lot of different recipes that I've created, and you will want to get as many of the herbs off of the herbal correspondences sheet that I've created as possible. Now, I understand if you can't get them all. And so one thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be providing a basic what you will need for this course and this video for the entire course. And I'll also go over specifically what you'll need for week 1. And then at the end of week 1, you'll get a supply list for week 2. And at the end of week 2, you'll get a supply list for week 3. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you everything that you're going to need now. That way you can kind of gather the items that you're going to want. Now, some of you probably already have an extensive herbal collection, an extensive apothecary, dried flowers, things of that nature, and some of you don't. The great thing about this course, though, is even if you don't have all of those things right now, you will in the future. And you can always hold on to these recipe sheets and these correspondence sheets. These are things for you to utilize and add to your book shadows, your grimoires, and to use later on. And feel free to tweak these recipes to meet your own needs. Get creative with it. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Let's start by going over what you're going to need for the course in general, okay? So the first thing that you're going to want to have is jars. Lots and lots of jars, and I suggest getting variations of sizes. These little ones are great, And when we make salves, if you don't have the tins that I recommend off of Amazon, then you can easily use small jars. You can use any container you want, but I would always suggest that you use something airtight, and I would refrain from using plastic. You're gonna be pouring a hot material into it, and you don't wanna have any BPA residue. This is a good size jar too to have on hand. There's the half pints and the pints. These are both good. Now, when we start creating oils and things like that, and you're gonna have a lot of herbs of various sizes, you're gonna wanna have larger jars. Now, this is a quart jar, and I use these all the time. I actually sometimes even use the larger jars, the half-gallon jars, when I'm making large vats of oils for things that I want to make in excess to sell. You don't have to do that. This is just some suggestions. You can even use jars that you've saved. You can use, marinara sauce jars, things like that. Again, I don't want you to go broke over this. So if you already have some jars that you've been saving from products that you've eaten or consumed in your kitchen, those are perfect. Just make sure to clean them out really good. And if they've had tomato sauce or pickles or anything like that, make sure that the jar is able to really air out. Those jars can hold those vinegary smells and those tomato smells for a really long time. And we don't want those smells to impede on the recipe and the smells of the herbs that we're gonna be creating in those jars. So if you decide to go that route, just make sure that you air dry your jars. Okay, the second thing that you're gonna wanna have, and you can go either way. You can either get some cheesecloth. This was, I think, from Walmart, but you can get it at most general stores. You can even order it online. And it's used, as you can see in the picture, it's used to strain. We're gonna be using this quite a bit. Now, you can also go the other route, and you can use pantyhose. These are from the dollar store. I use pantyhose all the time for lots of things. You just cut off strips of the legs, and you can use them to the same purpose that you use cheesecloth. So, witchy hack for you guys. I have both because I like to use some for different things. If it's powdery and more fine ground up, then I definitely want to use the nylon pantyhose for straining, just because the holes are tighter. If it's something that's a little bit coarser, I have thicker stems, things like that, then I can get away with using cheesecloth. Totally up to you. If you want to get both, by all means do so, but you really only need one. The next thing that you're going to want to get for the course, that you're going to be using quite a bit, are going to be glass measuring jars. I like to use a couple of different sizes. This is the 2-cup size, and I also have a bigger one that I use, and this is a 4-cup size. It's not necessary that you have both, but I do suggest if you have them ready and on hand, but you definitely want one. Again, the same applies. You want to use glass when possible. We don't want BPA to leak out into our products. And we are using, in some instances, the glass measuring cup as the inside of our double boiler. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to use plastic. It would melt in the boiling water. But we'll talk more about that later. The next thing that you're going to want to have are some different kitchen utensils. We'll start with this one. Kitchen scale. Doesn't have to be this exact one. This one was really cost effective. I think it was $12. I've had it for a couple of years. One of my favorite things about it is that it has several different measurements. It does pounds, ounces, grams, milliliters, and variations of those in combination. So it's really perfect for what we're gonna do, because sometimes you're gonna be measuring out liquids, and sometimes you're gonna be measuring out solids, and sometimes they're gonna be a little small amount, half ounces down all the way down to the tenths of ounces. And then in other instances, you might be using a higher measurement. So definitely want to get these. Now, if you have a manual scale, you can use that, of course. This is just a little bit more convenient. Another kitchen utensil that you're going to want to have on hand, wooden spoon. So this one is really special to me, and I actually show it in a couple of videos throughout the course, but my friend and sister witch decorated it for me with a wood burner, and as you can see, she did the triple moon on there, and she also did a pentagram. The next item on our list is going to be kitchen funnels. I got these from the dollar store also. I actually have another set aside from this one that's a little bit smaller, but this one's great too. The dollar store is actually super witchy, and a lot of people don't realize that. I call it being a bruja on a budget. So when you need supplies, you can even get candles there when push comes to shove. They do tend to burn a little faster than some of the more expensive, higher quality wax-made candles, but they work in a pinch, and for doing a spell or anything like that, they will get the job done. Anything like kitchenware, things like that, you can get really, really inexpensive at dollar store. So that's my other witchy hack for you. I'm going to provide you with quite a few here. Okay, so another thing that you're going to want to have is labels. I have these labels on my jars that I use, and you can get these at grocery store. We have HEB here. Sometimes you can get them at Walmart. You can order them online. What I love about these specific labels is that they're made to wash off in the water. So after, if you've used everything inside of it and washed it out, like, it comes off easier. If you've ever reused a jar that you had spaghetti sauce in or something like that, then you know how much of a pain it can be trying to get those labels off. So I like this for that purpose, and they're pretty cute, but not necessary. When push comes to shove, you can use the good old-fashioned garage sale labels. Anything that you can write on with sticky on the back. The important part is that you're able to write what's inside the jar, and also able to date it, what it is, what the contents are, put a date on it. All that stuff's really important, especially when we start talking about making tinctures and oils. When there's an emulsification process, you're going to want to know when it's been 4 or 6 weeks. And if you're like me, you're not going to be able to remember that off the top of your head, especially when you have several blends going. So labels are super important. The next thing that we're going to need is apple cider vinegar. And it doesn't have to be the Bragg's brand. I know that that's a popular brand. I think that's what I have in my cupboard right now. Apple cider vinegar. Just get a container of it. We're going to use that for at least one of our tinctures. And another thing that you're going to want to get, if you feel comfortable with it, is a bottle of 80 proof vodka. I just get a bottle of Skull, half gallon for like whatever, 10, 11 bucks at the liquor store. I say if you're comfortable with it, and the reason I say that is I myself am in recovery. I have quite a few years. I have almost 7 years now. And earlier in my recovery, I would not have been comfortable walking into the liquor store and certainly not buying booze, right? But as my recovery has strengthened, I understand that my intentions for using this is not to drink. That's not at all what the purpose is. What I'm getting it for is to use to make tinctures and things like that, to draw out the constituents of plants. So talked to my husband about it and made a decision that I felt comfortable with actually having it in the house, and so we do. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, or if you're going to be using your tinctures on small children for the most part, then you can also make every tincture we're going to create with apple cider vinegar. And in that case, you will just want to have more apple cider vinegar. I would buy a couple of the bottles of it in that case. Again, totally up to you. I want everyone to be as comfortable as possible. Another thing that we're going to need for the course is beeswax. Now you can buy beeswax like this, like in a block, and then just kind of cut it up. That's what I've been doing. I've been using this one for a while. I just cut off what I need, break it up into smaller pieces. Or you can buy beeswax that's already ground up into granules. That might be a little bit easier for you. Now, if you're adverse to using beeswax, if you want to do vegan products, because beeswax is not technically vegan, okay? But if you want to do that route, a substitute would be Candelilla wax, and you can get that pretty readily available to you at most craft stores. You can purchase it online. You could even use soy if you wanted to. Just know that we're going to use this for a base for ourselves. And so whatever kind of waxy substance you get, you want to make sure that it's good and safe to use on the skin, and something that you wouldn't mind putting on your skin or your loved one's skin. Okay, the next thing that we're going to want to get is activated charcoal. I actually have some set aside here in a little Pyrex container. And the one that I have, you can buy it in the store, but this one I actually got at like a trade show or something, and it's labeled as tooth whitening powder, but all that it is activated charcoal. So I didn't really like the way that it acted on my teeth. I didn't really think it worked. So now it is in my witchcraft supply room. Okay, next thing that you're going to want to get is some Epsom salt. We're going to use that when we make poultices and in our herbal baths. And you're going to want to have some of that on hand. You can get that anywhere. You can get it at CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, HEB, online, a number of places. You don't need a big bag. Just a little bag will be fine. And I would also ask that you not get, I know that there's some lavender scented Epsom salt, stuff like that. Don't get anything with added scents, because we're gonna add our own, smells and herbs and mixtures. We're gonna do that on our own, and we really don't want any outside influences. And we also don't want fragrances or perfumes. We want everything to be as natural as possible. So please don't get the ones with the added scents, okay? Another thing that you're gonna wanna get is a small container of baking soda. It doesn't have to be big. You might already have some on hand. We really only need a couple of tablespoons, maybe 4 tops. So don't break the bank, buy stuff you don't need. If you've got some in the refrigerator, which is the case with me, that'll be fine. Another thing that you're gonna wanna get is Florida water. And in fact, if you don't know what that looks like, let me show you. So Florida water is a spiritual cleanser. It's been used traditionally in hoodoo and root work for a very, very long time. You can actually make your own. There's a lot of recipes out there. We're not going to do that for this course, but there are a lot of recipes out there if you choose to do that. Or you can just purchase them. There are a lot of different brands out there. There are witches that make their own and sell it. This is the one that I get. It's one of the oldest brands out there. And it's trusted, it's inexpensive, it's Murray and Layman's. There you go. I use Florida water in a number of things. I use it in floor washes. I use it a little bit in my spiritual baths. I use it to cleanse surfaces. You know, smoke is great for cleansing the air, but what about cleansing our objects and our surfaces? I cleanse candles when I get those, and that actually brings me to the next thing that we're going to need for this course. We're going to need some white candles. I use these, either Shabbos candles, but you don't have to. You can use chime candles, white taper candles, just as long as they're not encased in glass, you can use them. And before I do any kind of spell work, I always cleanse with my Florida water. Another kind of candle that you're going to want to have for this course is a glass encased candle. I'm suggesting white for both. And the reason being is because you can charge white with any intent. You can use it for any kind of spell. Don't ever feel like, oh, I only have this, I only have that, so I can only kind of do this. As you can see, back up here, I keep a few different colors on hand because I never know what's gonna pop off and what I'm gonna need to do. But white can be charged with anything. So always know that if you're gonna invest in maybe like a larger box of candles, which is why I got these Shabbos candles, there were 72 of them for I think $8. And so it was a hell of a deal, and I love candle magic, so I knew I was gonna use them. Again, cleanse with Florida water. Another thing that you're gonna wanna get is a barbecue skewer. And I bought some at my local grocery store. I just bought a pack of them. I've had the same package for about 2 years. We're gonna need that as a tool to poke holes into our glass encased candles. So if you don't have barbecue skewer, or you don't wanna use a barbecue skewer, you can make really anything that you can poke holes into wax with, you can use. So if you wanna cut up a piece of a hanger, a metal hanger, that can technically work. I'm suggesting the barbecue skewer because they're easy, they got a point at the end, but it's not necessary. Just as long as you have something that you can carefully and safely put holes into the wax of your glass encased candle. Oops. Okay, the next thing that you're gonna wanna have is you're gonna wanna have a base oil of some kind. I was looking back to see if I had any base oils back here, and I don't, so I'll just tell you. I typically use olive oil for almost everything. I use it for my base oil when I'm making oils. I use it when I'm adding to make a salve or a balm of any kind. I also really like to use grapeseed oil. Some people are more inclined to use like shea oil or almond oil, and those are great too. They are a little bit more expensive, and so olive oil and grapeseed oil will do the trick, just so you know. Completely up to you what kind of base oil you choose to get, but I would get a pretty good size container of it, especially if you want to make as many. There's going to be several recipes on the recipe sheet, and if you want to make them all, you're going to need a good amount. So get a good size, whatever kind of oil you decide to go with, get a good amount of it, okay? Another thing is oil droppers. I actually have some that I bought offline. Because we're going to be making our own oils, we're not going to have built-in droppers like some essential oils do. A lot of essential oils have built into the top, they have the dropper, so you just pour it out, drop what you need, and it actually can help you keep from overdoing it. We're not going to have that when we make our own oils and jars and such. So it's important that you have some kind of an oil dropper. Even if it's, you know, you could really get creative with it and get those things that you administer medicine to babies with, and you could actually use that and just rinse it out and reuse it if you want to be as waste-free as possible. Totally up to you. Just know it's a good idea to get a dropper. And that's what you'll need for this course in general. Now we're going to go over the items that you will need for this week specifically. Okay, for the first week, what you're going to want to have is a tea strainer. I highly suggest this. It is optional, but you're going to want to have it in the future. They're super witchy, super inexpensive, and great when you're going to make your own teas. Now, push comes to shove, you can always use cheesecloth and create like a little pouch and let your herbs seep in the water like that to steep. But I suggest a tea strainer. The next thing that you're going to want to have is a tea kettle to boil water in. And if you don't want to use tap water, of course, distilled water, spring water, alkaline water, whatever your preferred water is. We're going to be making some teas this week. Another thing that you're going to want to have is some macrame, jute cord, or really any string. I prefer macrame or jute cord. We're going to be using this to dry and hang our herbs. So anything that you have enough that you can tie a good amount around a bundle of herbs and to hang. So this is another dollar store find, by the way. Another thing that you're going to need is a mortar and pestle. If you don't already have one, I highly suggest investing in one. You will use these so much in your craft. You can see I've got a little bit of some herbs in there now. Mortar and pestle is great for grinding up eggshells, grinding up herbs, grinding up resin incense. You'll use it for a myriad of projects in your craft. For me personally, in addition to mortar and pestle, I like this next little contraption. This is a molcajete. You can see it's got a little bit of resin in there too. I prefer using these to grind up heavier, more durable items. There's some things like pine or rosemary that's super stringy and not as easily broken down, especially if you're going to work with fresh herbs. I would go this route. It's really gritty, it's really grainy inside, and the rough edges help break up some things. Now, you can also use a coffee grinder. I have a coffee grinder, but I don't use it for grinding up herbs. But I do understand that some people have arthritis or, pain in their wrists or their hands or whatever, kind of situation you may be in where grinding is hard for you. And the thing is that when you grind with mortar and pestle and with molcajetes, it can be a little bit strainful on your body and on your wrists and not necessarily ergonomically sound. And so if you would like, you can always use a coffee grinder. I would buy a coffee grinder specifically for that purpose. Don't use the one you use to grind your coffee beans. It's going to be gross and you're not going to want to use it for either one after. It's going to make your herbs smell and taste like coffee, and your coffee is going to smell and taste like herbs, which I love both of those things, but just not together. Another thing that you're going to want to have is you're going to want to get some herbs of choice. Look over the module for the week. There's 3 modules for week 1. And I want you to look those over and really think about, the kind of blends that you want to make. Go over the herbal correspondences sheet. Those are all ones that we're going to use quite regularly. And make sure to get those herbs. Get the herbs that you want to use for your projects that we're going to make. We're going to be making teas. We're going to be making herbal blends for incense for this first week. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Another thing that you're going to want for this week's lesson, because we're going to be making herbal blends for incenses, are the charcoal discs. You can get these online. You can get them. They're actually, what they are is they're charcoal discs that are used in smoking out of hookahs. So if you go to any hookah bar, or even some vape shops might have them, things like that. But these are great for burning incense on. So if you've never used these before, these are another thing that I would get to invest in your craft. That sums up all the items that you're going to be needing for this week specifically, and an overview of what you're going to be needing for the course in general. There's going to be a total of 11 modules featured in this entire course. We're going to go over working with plant spirits, harvesting plants, and herbal correspondences in Module 1. Module 2, we're going to go over herb blends, starter witch recipes, which is a recipe sheet that I've created for you that you will use throughout the entirety of this course, as well as the herbal correspondence sheet. You're going to want to save those to your desktop, you're going to want to save them to your phone, what have you, because you will continue to use them. And I want you to implement those in your craft moving forward as well. We're also going to learn how to make incense blends and teas and infusions, and that will be in Module 2, Week 1. And in the third module, we're going to kind of wrap up, we're going to review everything, and that's when I'm also going to give you any added homework assignments, as well as your supply list for Week 2. And Week 2 also has, Week 2 has 4 modules. We're going to go over creating oil blends, dressing candles. We're going to go over what tinctures are, how you use them. We're going to make 3 kinds of tinctures. And we're also going to discover and explore decoctions and what makes them different from infusions and how you use those and when you use those, etc. Then Module 7 is going to be our wrap-up module. We're going to just review the week, and we're also going to go over homework assignments and what you'll need for Week 3. And Week 3 has 4 modules also. And in Week 3, we're going to go over making salves and ointments. We're going to learn about how to make them, what you use them for, and we're going to make one together. And then we're also going to go over poultices. And there's a couple of different ways to make poultices, and we're going to discuss those. And then we're going to make a couple of those. And we're also going to talk about herb baths, and we're going to go over what are attracting herbs and what are removing herbs. You're going to have a PDF sheet on that as well, and that's another thing that you're going to want to save and hold on to. We're going to go over a couple of different ways that people, witches in general, and different kind of spiritualities, take herbal baths for magical purposes, and we're going to go over some recipes for doing that too. And then we're going to do our final wrap-up. We're going to do course and review, and that'll be our course. I'm really excited to share this with you guys. I've also included some resources. If you look at the end of the course syllabus, there will be some resources for you for additional reading, learning, things like that. I reference a couple of those books in some of this course, and also I would recommend them for future reading, adding to your witch collection. If you're like me, as you can see, obviously I like books. I do have Audible and I do listen to books sometimes, but there's something about having a paperback copy or even a hardback copy, just having that printed book. I love it. I write notes in the margins, highlight, reference them all the time. Can't stress how big of an influence books have had in my craft, probably equally to plants, and so that's really saying something. Well, witches, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get this party started. So now what I'd like you to do is to go ahead and head on over to the next part of this course, which is the PDF on herbal correspondences. We're going to go over that and study that, and let's go ahead and begin.